Welcome back. This is not your average episode of the Property Buyble. Today we're going to be doing a very special collaboration, which we've never done before, with a company called Ortus Financial. Today I have with me to help co-host the show and discuss a very important, relevant topic at the moment, Adam Rakowski. He is a mortgage broker and founder of Ortus Financial. Welcome.
Thank you.
This is very exciting. We've never done this before and collaborated on this kind of, such a relevant topic in the market at the moment. I rarely talk about very specific things for, different points throughout the year, but I think this is so important to go through and it comes up every single day. What are we going to talk about today?
Yeah, you're right, Kim. It's a hot topic and I do field inquiry daily.
Yes.
And essentially it is, should I buy now?
Yes.
Or should I wait?
Yes. And that's the big question, right? Everyone's circumstances are a little bit different.
Indeed.
But people want to know, what's the market doing? What am I doing? What's my serviceability with the bank doing? And everything in between. And so rather than us reading all those articles and listening to the media and everything in between, we're going to be showing real data today of what is actually happening.
That's right. I mean, it's hard because the media have a lot of information out there and trying to disseminate what is the truth is hard. And as an ex-banker, I love my data. So as a source of truth, I think it actually does hit home what is happening in the market. We're
going to be going through quite a few different bits of data, aren't we?
Yeah, so look, we're trying to paint a picture where we're looking at servicing capacity to borrow. Yeah. We're looking at property prices and how the two correlate and what the trends are, more importantly, over the course of this year. So from January to now and then on to December, trying to forecast that period. And there's a pretty clear message there, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So by the end of this episode, people are going to have the answer to that question. Should I wait? Should I buy now? Should I sell now? The writing's going to be on the wall quite literally. And by the end of this, everybody is going to know what the answer is for them specifically.
Definitely. So I think to set the scene, we'll start with interest rates and talk about the prices and rate changes.
What do we have here, Adam?
Okay, so like I mentioned, very topical. There's a lot of information and data here, but effectively we've got three line graphs here. Each one represents an interest rate. We all know the cash rate, which we hear about all the time in the media. We've got then an average borrowing rate.
Yes.
So we've looked at the average best rate in the market at the time.
From a variable perspective?
Okay. And then, of course, the assessment rate, which for those that don't know, the assessment rate is the rate the bank will use when they determine what you can borrow.
Okay.
And so, we'll look at the passage of time from January through to now. And as we mentioned earlier, we'll forecast or try to forecast what it could mean through to the end of the year.
Okay, amazing. All right, so Adam, we've got this line graph here that we're working with those different types of rates on it that you were just mentioning. And what we can see here, it looks like, January earlier this year, all the way through to December at the end of this year. Obviously, the January to August rates, they're the actuals that we've seen. Is that right?
That's right. So we're now at a situation where the cash rate is above 2% for the first time since April 2016. And at 2.35, where we sit now, actually the highest rate since December 2014.
Yeah,
so
wow.
Almost 8 years. And as it happens so far, each bank has increased their mortgage rate in line with the cash rate increase. So you're right, through the first 4 months of the year, there was no change. And in fact, the Reserve Bank did tell us all that there'd been no change till 2024.
Yep.
Of course,
they lied.
Well, that's one word for it. But they certainly then have embarked on a pretty swift increasing strategy. Certainly, 4 months in a row now of pretty steep increases.
Yeah.
And the banks, God love them, they've all moved equally. So whether you're with ANZ or CBA, whoever, every bank has passed on in full every rate so far.
Wow. And these rates that you've put on here, because I know you mentioned earlier, we've got the variable actual rates that people are getting against their mortgages that they have. And then we've got those assessment rates that you mentioned. Are these just averages across the banks at this stage?
Well, look, good point. So the assessment rate, for those that don't know, when you go for a mortgage, that is the rate that they use to determine what you can borrow.
Yes.
And it's governed by rules and regulations. So effectively, the way the bank, every bank is forced to use is the higher of 5.25% or your actual rate plus 3%.
Wow. Okay.
So that's relevant because now that the cash rate has been on an upward move, every increase to that cash rate means an increase to the mortgage rate, like I mentioned, and then an increase to the assessment rate, which by default means a lower borrowing capacity.
Yeah, wow. And for those that are listening to the audio of this and can't see this beautiful graph that we have in front of us, we're looking at an recent RBA cash rate of 2.35 as of the beginning of September. Correct. And then what are our other average rates for the mortgages?
Yeah, good point. So where we started the year from a mortgage point of view, 2.24% would have been a good variable rate to achieve.
Yep.
After the recent increase that you mentioned, that 2.24 has become 4.34.
Yeah, wow.
So it's almost doubled.
Yeah, wow.
Let's face it. And it's doubled in a short period, which is, I think, what people are...
6 months.
Being spooked by.
Yeah.
And that's why the question is arising so often, should I buy, should I wait? Because we haven't had time to digest it. One rate rise comes.
Yes.
A month passes and another one comes. So it's hard to keep track of the impact on your situation, I think.
For sure. And you see that 2%, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when we translate that to dollars, from a mortgage perspective or from a serviceability perspective, it is quite frightening, which we will look at today in a bit more detail. But that 4.34%, that really translates to roughly a 7.34% assessment rate, which is just wild.
Correct. So, the good news there is that the bank is allowing a buffer. So when you're borrowing that kind of money, they give you the buffer to make sure if rates do rise even further, and no one is saying it'll go to 7.3, 4, hopefully not. But I think that is what that is doing for you. But the other thing to keep in mind is from now till the end of the year.
Yeah.
So the Reserve Bank does give you a bit of a clue when it releases these rate rises, and they've left a little tidbit for us recently where they said that they do think there'll be more rate rises in the future.
Okay.
But they're not set on a path.
Okay.
So it's probably the first time we've heard them sort of leave it open to maybe have a rise or maybe not a rise. So we've all known they were coming, but I think, again, the message here is to be mindful of what is coming and what that means for you in your situation.
And that's helped you sort of forecast the rates until the end of the year. So tell us a little bit more about the forecasted for really September through to December this year, because that's also on the graph.
So we're at 4.34 mortgage rate off a 2.35% cash rate.
Yes.
And again, there's a ton of experts out there who get surveyed often, and most of them are now saying that between now and the end of the year, we can expect another 0.5% increase.
Okay.
So the Reserve Bank will meet 3 more times.
Yep.
And over that period, it's forecast to be another 0.5%. So whether that's a 0.25 next month and a 0.25 in November or 0.5 and nothing, that's where we think we're going to go.
We'll see.
I think it's fair to assume that that's probably a likely outcome.
So really by the end of December, the average variable rate could be around the sort of 4.84% mortgage rate.
Definitely. And in fact, people will be above 5. So 4.84 would represent a good typical rate, which, like I said, is more than double the 2.24 from January. So to sink in, 2.24 to 4.84
it's massive.
in less than a year.
It's massive.
And again, plenty of people who have been loyal to their bank are paying north of 5 by that point.
And look, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about, fixed versus variable. When you look at fixed rates, obviously you're fixing your rate for a certain period, and different circumstances are going to pertain to different people. If a fixed rate was on this line graph, it would effectively be even higher. Is that correct?
Oh, definitely. And look, fixed rates do vary from bank to bank. But to give you an idea, at the moment, the best fixed rate you'll find in the market is probably a 1 or 2 year rate around 5%.
Wow.
At today's rate. And yes, you are right. Whether the rate is fixed or variable, the bank will apply that buffer to that rate. So if you opt for a 5.5% fixed rate, 8.5 will be your assessment rate.
Yeah, wow.
So again, important to understand if you go down that path, because for you might want certainty in repayment. Your borrowing capacity is impacted more so than it would be if you were on variable. Yeah, so again, a lot to think about.
And I know the whole reason we're doing this exercise is to show people those buyers that you and I were speaking to in January are kicking themselves that they didn't buy in January, or they didn't get their foot in the door because now these rates are going up and their serviceability is changing, which we're going to get into shortly. By December, you're probably going to be in a worse situation, I have to say, looking at these numbers. And so we'll explore that a bit more clearer, but I think that's really helpful for a lot of people just to visually even see that is what's going on, and that's what's just gone on. It's not even most of that year half the year is already real rates. The rest of the few months is just forecasted.
Definitely. And again, what I think has caught us by surprise is people, I think, had known what was going to happen, and they were planning for rate increases, but not the rate and the level. So certainly, again, given we're seeing now where rates are doubled effectively.
Yes. The
time you've had to digest that and plan has been
very minimal.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And I guess, again, I think the data is clear, and we're glad to share that data with everyone today, because I think it does really show what's happened and what will continue to happen in the next quarter.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think the next thing we should probably look at then, Adam, is the purchasing power and how this translate into actual dollars. Yes. So what people can borrow. So we've got a graph on the screen. Can you explain to people what this is and talk through that in a bit more detail?
Of course. So we used an example that we had of a typical buyer at the start of the year.
Yeah.
And effectively we've assumed a few things to make it be consistent, but this is an 80% loan to value ratio client buying a home to live in.
Yes.
Okay. We've also assumed over the course of the year no change to their circumstances, so no income changes, no change to anything, quite frankly, to keep it simple.
Yep.
And also, so you can see the 3.1 there at the start of the year, and how that has tracked through. It's pretty stark.
Yeah, I mean, so they could buy a property for 3.1 million in January.
That's right. So the base case was giving us a 3.1 so this is a maximum. Maximum. So a lot of my clients who are getting pre-approvals, whilst they might not plan to borrow every cent,
of course,
they want to know what the max is, and that does represent the maximum.
Okay. And then if we go through to August or the end of August now.
That's right. You can see it's 2.6. So
yes,
that's a 15% drop in borrowing capacity.
In 6 months.
That's right.
In seven months.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And look, again, this covers the broader market, and we'll talk through the subset soon around different parts of Sydney, but that represents an average situation, typical situation. And again, it's the speed of that decline. So 15% in the context of what you could borrow on day one, versus now, it's huge. And I think people probably didn't expect that. And with prices dropping, obviously it's easy to go, well, I'll wait.
Yeah.
But often you don't consider the other part of the equation, which is the borrowing capacity.
When someone says the words, I think I'll wait, or I'm going to wait, or you can't change my mind about waiting, it's the most frustrating thing in the world, because obviously everyone has different personal circumstances, but I feel like shaking people sometimes and saying like, look at what's happening. You're going to miss out if you don't do something now. And a lot of these people have these standard circumstances where the serviceability is just going down on a daily basis or on a monthly basis. Every time the rates change, boom, down, down, down again. I mean, this one example that you've given, $500,000 these people have lost by waiting for 6-7 months.
Yeah, and look, there are other factors at play here which make it even harder. Look, some banks are honouring a pre-approval period. And what I mean there is if you were pre-approved for a loan in, say, June, you generally have 90 days to exchange. Now, some banks out there, not many, but some are saying to the client, okay, client, if you then buy in September, we will honour your borrowing capacity from July.
That's very kind of them.
Others won't though. Others won't.
Yeah.
And it can be a big difference, as you can see. So
then you got rate lock as well and things like that.
That's right. So again, it's so fluid. So people might choose one bank over another because their rate was 0.05 cheaper. However, that bank won't be the one that'll hold their assessment rate.
Yes.
So again, you've got to be very careful and very clear of not just today's position, but what it could mean for you next month and the month after.
Totally.
I mean, that's the key thing. You've got to be careful just to chase one component of your situation. You've got to be mindful of
all of them,
given how fluid it is. So we can't just sit back and take our time, I think. Or if we do, that's fine. But again, understand the impact or potential impact on you.
For sure. And I mean, this is very simple example to give, but very clearly shows what we're working with some of the averages and the trends that we're seeing in the market at the moment. And if you could just explain to people, I mean, the January to August data is quite clear, but then you've basically forecasted to the end of the year for this particular client.
So as I mentioned, it is likely that there'll be more rate rises to come.
Yes.
The quantum is unknown, but the general idea won't change, is that the borrowing capacity today, already impacted, will be worse again. So again, waiting is fine in isolation as long as you understand that 2.6 today could be as low as 2.38 in December. Now, of course, as we'll touch on, if prices drop, and they will drop, but it's the two and how they act together, which is the key. So if your borrowing capacity drops at a certain rate and prices drop at a different rate, that'll be a divergence.
Which is the fun part of today's episode.
That's right.
So really in summary to this graph, we're looking at, January 3.1 million borrowing or purchasing power.
That's right.
December potentially 2.38.
I think it's close to 25%, which it sounds pretty stark.
It is.
But it is. And again, if I just remind everyone again, rates have doubled effectively.
Yeah.
Or by that stage would have more than doubled. So it does make sense.
Yeah. And it really puts this into perspective. And I guess the kicker is getting a loan for 3.1 versus potentially, at 80% LVR, of course, but purchasing at 2.38 at the end of the year, your repayments are actually going to be higher than that 3.1 in January.
You're right. And that is the other issue, is that mentally you're obviously having to deal with the fact that you can't potentially buy what you wanted to buy.
Yeah.
But then kind of strangely at the same time,
you're paying
more for that property that perhaps you couldn't get or didn't want in the first place. So it's definitely, again, it all ties back to the same thing around being really mindful of what is coming, not just where we are today.
Absolutely. And I guess the next thing to tie in there, which is when it starts to get a bit interesting, is let's look at the median house price for Sydney and the property market. So right now we're showing up on the screen a graph of the median house price. These are sold prices in Sydney, and it's over 4 regions combined. We've got east and suburbs, inner west, North Shore and Northern Beaches, all combined into one median house price. Basically, and this data was provided by a very reputable source, the guys at Suburb Trends. Shout out to Kent Lardner for providing this. But basically what we're looking at is in January, the median house price combined across those 4 regions of Sydney was sitting at about the sort of 3 million or thereabouts, just above. Now that median house price is sitting about 2.8, and forecasting with the data that we use and the way that we use our forecasting tools, we're looking at a potential drop of 2.58 in December, even further. So
is that forecasting done in a similar way? How have we forecast that?
Yeah, so the way that we do the forecasting is we generally get the last 3 months of growth and the average of the growth, and then we do a rolling average over the next 3 months to come. And it's the most accurate way. So this median house price, just to let everybody know, it's taken over a 90-day average. So the previous 90 days before is the most accurate way to indicate where is the current median house price sitting to begin with on a monthly basis. And then the remainder of the months for the year, September through to December, we're talking about 2022, we do a rolling average, kind of mirroring what's just happened, mirroring that forward. And it's slightly different per region, but this is a combined graph of all 4 of those regions together. And, it's that in itself is pretty, it's pretty intense seeing that line.
And I think given what we just discussed around the rate situation and the fact that we are guaranteed, sadly, to have more rate rises, I think that it's fair to assume or be prepared for that kind of graph for the last quarter, because rate rises do translate directly into lower median prices.
Yeah, one affects the other, right? Yeah. But it's a question of which is dropping quicker. And I think that's why you and I wanted to go through this stuff today, to really look at what each of those data sets is doing and be able to show this information to people. But just the median house prices alone, we're looking at about an 8.8% drop between January and now, end of August. And then we're forecasting a potential 6% plus to come in the coming months. So that's a total of potentially 14 to 15% decrease over the year in those particular regions.
Yeah, and look, you're right. In isolation, definitely interesting, and like the rate graph, you have to know.
Yes.
But I think you touched on it. The real key here is combining the two.
Yes.
And how they're interacting and where they're going. That is where we see the real gold, I think.
So let's combine those two.
Let's
make it a bit interesting.
That's right.
All right. So we've got 2 lines, don't we?
We do. So we've taken the two graphs and combined them. So purchasing power, which effectively is what you could borrow.
Yep.
And combined by your contribution. So effectively what you could buy for in total, graphed next to the median house price.
Yes.
Okay. And like we mentioned, there is definitely a correlation, as you would expect, and as the media has at length explained.
Yep.
But what isn't often talked about, and quite frankly is the whole point behind, I think, today's presentation exercise, is the fact that the media doesn't talk about this. And you'll see there in June, or for those of you who can't see, in June, the 2 lines meet.
Yes.
Okay, so the borrowing capacity or the purchasing power and the median house price.
They crossover. Yeah.
So what that means is in the first half of the year, if prices were dropping and rates started to nudge up in May, you kind of could have sat back and just taken it all in, so to speak.
Yep.
But again, the pace of the rate rises wasn't forecast. So what's now happened is it's crossed over.
Yeah, and it's starting to separate. So for those that can't see the graph, what we've got on here is basically we have a starting point in January based off of a runoff of all the data we've just been talking about. A client that was looking at having a purchasing power of 3.1 million. At the time, the median house price was just under 3.1 million. So we had them aligned quite similarly. And they've run alongside of each other for the first few months, because really the rate changes didn't kick in till...
Yeah, May was the first one.
Till May. So bit of a lag. And then we kind of see after May and June, those two lines start to cross over. And I mean, what happens then?
They do. So, I mean, look, prices going down, not surprising. People have been sort of talking about it. But what they haven't spoken about is that the borrowing capacity, the purchasing power is dropping faster than prices are dropping. Okay, so all things being equal, okay, you now can't borrow for the property that you could have borrowed for. So again, first half of the year, dropping prices in isolation might not worry you that so much.
Yep.
You can still buy what you wanted to. Now you can't.
You can't.
So, you know, do I wait or do I not wait? Again, different answer for different circumstance.
Of course.
However, the key message here and the clear message, and one that actually won't go away now, is by waiting,
you're effectively decreasing the value of the property you're going to be buying.
You are. You cannot borrow unless something you get a pay rise, unless things change. You can't.
Yes.
And that's just a fact.
And look, a lot of things affect this data, right? There's lots of different variables that get thrown in, especially when you're dealing with averages and median and things like that. But this allows us to see the trends as accurate as possible when we go through this process. And even now, end of August, early September, the median house price is just over 2.8 million. But the servicing is dropped down to 2.6.
Yeah, the gap is actually increasing.
Yes.
And I think that's sort of the scary part, if you want, in that, again, if you hadn't planned for this situation, or if you were very close to your borrowing capacity to start with, we've assumed that. But if you had no buffer in your personal situation, so to speak, the impact is very stark.
Yeah.
And then I guess the question then becomes, I think part of the problem is people have tried to pick the point in the market, and no expert, whether you're a mortgage broker or a buyer's agent or a sales agent, no one knows when that is.
Yeah,
and I think people understandably want to be obsessed with not paying too much.
Yeah.
But again, the price of that is now that we're in this situation where this trend is evident. And again, this is a summary, but every subset of the market is the same trend, and it's going to keep diverging. So we're not at a point now where we expect that to break up again. So I think that the borrowing capacity, the power to purchase will remain lower than the average median house price.
I completely agree. And we've seen this from studying this data recently, you and I, going through this in detail and having a look at what are the mortgage trends doing, what are the property trends doing, and how do we make sense of this? And I think people have been focusing too much on trying to find the bottom of the market or trying to buy in at the bottom of the market, and they've lost sight of all the other things that are going on in the background. And that is your serviceability is changing, your borrowing power is going down, the rates are going up, your repayments are going up while you wait out for the bottom of the market, and you could effectively put yourself in a worse off position in some cases.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And it's not been the case for many, many years now. So we haven't had to worry about borrowing capacity. So like I mentioned at the start, the current rate we're in is the highest rate it's been since December 2014. So buyers in the last 8 years haven't had to grapple with this idea of having a consequence of waiting. Yeah. So again, it's not about rushing in or not rushing in. It's just understanding that by waiting, being very, very clear, and almost like plotting it. I mean, I love data as an ex-banker, but data is the source of truth. And I think using that data wherever possible to help you understand where you could be if you decide to wait. And again, that's just the whole idea is that point. And I think it's very clear.
Every month that passes, I mean, we're seeing the changes that are happening. And so, we're always talking about people, follow your own goals and follow your own timeline and so forth and do what's right for you. But just be aware that this is ticking away in the background, whether we like it or not. And there are changes that are happening. And just know that waiting is not necessarily the answer. And this data is kind of showing that as we go through it. But something interesting that we actually did as well is Adam and I not only looked at the median house price across those 4 regions, but we actually split up the regions as well to see what each of them were doing. So what we're looking at the moment is the eastern suburbs, the inner west of Sydney, the North Shore and the northern beaches. And they're all kind of similar, would you say?
They are, yeah. So, I mean, obviously the individual price points are a bit different.
Yes.
But obviously when the bank determines your borrowing capacity, they don't really care where you're buying. So, the divergence is the same. So the crossover happened early in the rate increase cycle, so around that June period of this year, as we mentioned, across all four regions. If you've been waiting for whatever reason, that's fine. In the last 3 months, the borrowing capacity, the purchasing power is below the median price in that region. So
in every region.
Doesn't matter where you want to buy. The same problem exists, and the same problem will continue to exist.
And it's funny because when we did this starter, we put the borrower or the borrowing power of the borrower at a very similar level to the starting median point in January. So we had them both kind of starting at a very similar spot, if anything slightly above, as you can see on the graph. And all four of those regions have ended up in a very similar spot. And that is, like you said, serviceability is dropping at a quicker rate than the median house price in the property markets of Sydney.
Yeah, so we did assume a base case for every starting point was the same. And then as you could imagine, if the east has a higher median price than the inner west, as rates rise equally, there'll be a bigger increase in there'll be a bigger impact, in absolute terms on borrowing capacity. So if you've got a higher starting debt requirement, the absolute dollar value, so the drop in your borrowing capacity, whilst it's the same as a percentage, the dollar value will be higher, say in the east, than the inner west, as an example.
But I mean, what have you picked up from all the stuff that we've been going through recently?
Look, I think number one thing for me is, given how fluid and dynamic the whole situation is, you need to be across everything. Talk to your broker, talk to a bank, but maybe a broker's better, and understand, am I with a bank that will honour my assessment rate? So if you're in the market looking to buy actively, that's key, because you have 90 days to buy effectively, but given what we've seen on the graphs, if you don't buy in that period and have to reassess your pre-approval, you'll be reassessed at a higher rate. And a higher rate means a lower borrowing capacity, lower purchase price. So that's the first thing. Be really across your situation. The other thing is understanding that why are you buying? Trying to pick a point in the market. I'm not an expert in the sense of when a good time to buy is, but what I do know is that being mindful of, why am I buying? Am I buying a house for 10 years? Is it my PPR? Is there going to be tax on that property, or am I trying to flip a property and make a quick buck? Different sort of mindset around that, and one's more sort of dangerous. But don't lose sight of why you're buying, and don't be. There's a lot of clickbait out there, a lot of media and opinion, which is is healthy in a way, but just don't lose sight of why you're buying. And again, understand the next month, next 2 months. If you do wait, totally fine.
What are the implications?
So just sort of like basic stuff, and it's hard to, because again, a lot of noise in this property and borrowing space.
There is.
Every day there's a headline. Just sort of take a step back, look at the data, understand where we are. It is what it is, but better late than never. We know that even today, if you've sort of started this today, so to speak, the next month after, we are going to see these trends continue. Don't be scared by that. Understand that, and of course, reach out to people around you who you trust, brokers, buyers agents, and just talk through what it means for you.
For sure. And we're going to probably do this again at the end of the year to see how things stacked up over the next few months, or will be the last few months when we talk about it in December or January. So it'd be really interesting to see all the forecasting tools that we use and resources. Did it end up where we thought it was going to end up, or did it end up in a completely different place? We never know with the property market when things happen, COVID hit, that changed the property market. Things change that are sort of like the black swan, and they're out of our control, and we never even know that they're going to come about. But we will be doing this exercise again in a couple of months just to see how things kind of branch off and how they play out as well. But I think my takeaways from that are, a lot of people that are buying homes, especially, like, you help people buy homes all the time with their borrowing, and most of them are long-term holds, right? And we're entering at this particular place in the market, in this massive timeline of your home ownership. When it comes time for those people to sell, whether it's 5, 10, 15 years down the track, any kind of market changes, in my opinion, and from historical growth of the Sydney market, or just in the Australian market in general, any dips in the market are going to well surpass, your capital growth is going to well surpass 5, 10, 15, 20 years time. It's going to be a thing of the past. So don't let it freak you out too much. Just get in at a time that's right for you. Know that the market changes all the time. So even if you feel like you don't get in at the lowest point of the market, eventually it'll go back up again, and you'll make your money over time. And we've seen that happen in the Australian market over the years. But that's a really big thing for me. And I always talk to people about that. But, the serviceability is decreasing quicker than the property market. I think that's the biggest takeaway from all of the data that we've used in the specific regions that we're using as well. Obviously, if you're a cash buyer, this doesn't affect you as far as...
Must be nice, yeah.
Must be nice. But the serviceability is obviously, you're not servicing for a loan. So you maybe want to hold out for a few more months to see if you can get a lower price property. We don't know for sure that it's going to drop to that level. We just use it based off of the forecasting tools that we have. But that's another thing to take into consideration. Also, if you're looking at like flipping a property or renovating and things like that, doing that in such a short time frame in such a volatile market is maybe not the best idea, in my opinion.
Yeah, and look, you mentioned there one thing which I sort of caught my attention is that people like to sort of focus on the recent sort of stuff, and the reality is, again, what the Reserve Bank does give us is clues on the future. Is that I think where we're heading to in this rate cycle is back to normal. So obviously, again, people who have enjoyed the last 8 years, if we're being sort of honest, they were record lows. Yeah. 0.1% cash rate.
Oh, it's great.
So I think, again, the Reserve Bank...
Very spoiled.
Yeah, in some ways. And I think it's fair to assume that the current rate cycle is going to stay where it is.
Yeah.
The Reserve Bank's trying to control inflation, and people who thinking rates will go down again to where they were, that's not going to happen. So I think, again, resetting the base case is key. So, whether we go up 0.5% or down 0.5%, rates might move in that range. But I think once this initial inflation period's over, I think the best way to think is that this is the new normal. Yeah. Don't think that 2.24% home loan rate is going to happen anytime soon. I think we are where now we probably should be.
Yeah,
for the medium term.
It's adjusting, right? Yeah. It's balancing back out again, like you said. And there's two things here that people don't talk a lot about. Like, people always talk about, should I wait as far as getting into the property market? But some people also talk about, like, I'm going to wait because the interest rates are too high. I've heard people say that before. And like, newsflash, if you are buying a home, you might have that loan for 10 to 30 years. You're going to have a lot of different types. I always say this, you can have a lot of different types of rates in that lifetime. You can only fix for so long, and then you go unfixed, you go back to variable. You might have interest only, principal and interest, all these sorts of things. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to, get through the good and the bad weather and the storms throughout the lifetime of that loan. And that is dealing with high and low interest rates. We've had it too low for too long, I think, and it's been great in the time that we've had it, but it's time to readjust back to the new norm. And you mentioned this before, but the whole reason that we did this was, like, there's so much media hype out there and stuff there that is just worrying people, and there's not enough real stuff or real evidence of what is really happening. And once you know what's really happening, it's not that scary, but it's more accurate, I think.
Yeah, you're right. I think demystifying what is happening, and again, where we are at now is still a good spot relative to where we've been. Some of our parents and others have seen rates in 20%. So we're not talking about anything that crazy. So I think when you sit back and think through where we are now, it's probably a fair point to be.
You guys make up your own decision after seeing all that stuff, but yeah, it's everyone's personal decision. I know my answer after seeing all that data, and I'm sure you do as well. But yeah, there's a lot to think about it. If rates and things freak people out, maybe buying a property is not for you. Rent for the rest of your life. Like, everyone's got options, right, and choices and things like that. But I've loved that. I thought that was so super helpful. And I've loved having you here and collabing with you on this.
Yeah, look, it's good to get a phone call tomorrow now. I can actually answer the question with some data. Again, it's not about opinion, right?
No.
Opinion is important, but data, that's the truth, I think.
And we didn't know the answer to this before we started this exercise.
No, and I wouldn't have guessed that, to be fair. So it just makes it easier. It's data. It's not my opinion. Take that how you will, and use that information for your situation. I think that for us, if we can give that information to people and help them, that's all that matters.
Exactly. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Hope that people listening and watching this, benefit from that and that shed light on a lot of things going on in the market, both from a mortgage perspective and a property market perspective. Adam and I were going to be doing a recap on all this after this year is over, just to see if our forecasting was on point or not. I guess we'll find out soon. We never know, but it's good just to have a rough idea of where things are going. But hope everyone took something away from that, and we'll see you soon next time for a regular episode of the Property Bible.